lectures where, to stop a bit of fatigue, the lecturer invites you to stand up and shake around and go as tall as a tree and talk to your neighbour and then feel refreshed and ready. Well, as you can see, we've extended that concept. We put you on a bus and brought you to somewhere different, so you should all feel refreshed and ready. As a board member of the EBMA, I'm truly grateful that the University of Exeter was kind enough to offer these facilities for us tonight and again tomorrow. We would have been here today, but the university has this sort of strange approach. It thinks that facilities like this should be for the students first. But however, as I really am truly grateful for the university, and I'd like to thank and I'd like to introduce to you Professor Tim Quine, who's our Deputy Vice-Chancellor of Education here at Exeter University. Tim.
Thank you, Adrian, and thank you all for coming. And good evening and a very warm welcome to the University of Exeter, to our medical school, to this lovely alumni auditorium, and to this evening's Calman lecture. My name's Tim Quine, as we've heard already. I'm the university's Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Education. I'm also a Professor of Earth Surface Science, so I'm not an education specialist, but I have a passion for education and for enhancing the experience of our students across the wide range of programmes that they undertake at the university. It's an absolute honour to welcome you to this European Board of Medical Assessors first annual conference. And it's really stimulating to see so many colleagues engaged in thinking critically about evidence, theory and practice in assessment. The delegate list is testament to the global relevance and interest in this vitally important subject. And it's clear from the programme that you are in the midst of an excellent series of papers and discussions that I'm sure are going to shape pedagogy and practice across our institutions. When Adrian and colleagues invited me to give this welcome address and told me about the conference, I was very interested to hear about its origins, and I was intrigued by the title of the conference, Crossing Boundaries, Assessment in Medical Education. You may imagine that with my academic origins in a geography department, I reflected on transboundary education in terms of international mobility of students and the diversity of international education. With my particular background in terms of physical geography, I remembered a paper that I wrote with a colleague, Andrew Nicholas, called Crossing the Divide, but that was actually about numerical modelling of rivers, so not much about education. Of course, in education, crossing boundaries speaks to many other dimensions, to interdisciplinary boundaries, learning space boundaries, and those moments of transition in the student journey through education that may be thought of as boundaries. Critical thinking about assessment is vital in relation to all of these dimensions, and the conference and the existence of the learned bodies supporting it provide clear evidence to me that medical educators are trailblazing in this respect. The influence of assessment on student behaviour is widely acknowledged, and I think it's quite elegantly summarised by John Cowan in the phrase, "Assessment is the engine which drives student learning." And I like Phil Race's little addition to that, that feedback is the oil that lubricates the cogs of understanding. Too often, I think we fail to make the most of those connections. I hear my colleagues bemoaning the fact that students are too assessment-driven, rather than using the knowledge of that relationship to devise assessment and feedback plans that encourage the learning that's intended and that is needed by the students. This integral element of pedagogy is more important than ever as we seek to ensure that our graduates demonstrate a wide range of attributes and soft skills, as well as deep knowledge and understanding. Many of our programmes claim that those learning outcomes are achieved, and they may well be, but relatively few of them systematically assess those across the full spectrum. In this respect, again, I think medical education is taking a lead, and I regularly encourage my colleagues across the university to cross boundaries, to familiarise themselves with the innovations in the medical school, and to use them as inspiration for their own pedagogy and practice. It's clear that this conference will stimulate more innovation and sharing of excellent practice, and I look forward to hearing from my colleagues who've been able to attend the whole conference more about the ideas shared, as well as learning directly from our distinguished Calman lecturer, Professor Kees van der Vleuten. I'm really looking forward to your talk in a few moments. Of course, conferences don't organise and run themselves, and both personally and on behalf of the university, I would like to take the opportunity to thank the EBMA Annual Conference Planning Committee, who made the conference possible, in particular to Professor Adrian Freeman, who has skillfully chaired the planning committee and overseen the event from inception to launch. Special thanks are also due to Cecilia and to Vivian from the University of Exeter Medical School, who provided the logistical, administrative and organisational support for the event, and without whom the event would not be running so smoothly. In closing, I'm reminded of Cardinal Newman's The Idea of a University. Written over 150 years ago, it suggests that the university's soul lies in the mark that it leaves. I believe that this message still has meaning today for the 21st university and the 21st century academic. Through our teaching and pedagogy, we must ensure that all our students are able to seek and to explore knowledge, to challenge established thinking, and to develop their skills. We must create supportive, challenging and inspiring communities of learning in which our students can flourish and succeed in readiness to cross another boundary to become graduates of distinction. So to conclude, I applaud your enthusiasm, passion and innovation in seeking to continually enhance assessment in medical education, and I'm sure that it will have reached far beyond your own disciplines. I wish you all the best for the rest of your conference, and I call on Derek Calman to introduce our guest speaker. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm delighted to see so many people here for the Calman lecture. The Academy of Medical Educators started 10 years ago, and this is our anniversary, 10-year anniversary. And in that time, we have been very, very fortunate with the quality of the speakers that we've had for the Calman lecture. It was so named after one of the founders of the Academy, Sir Kenneth Calman, who is, I know, very upset he cannot be with us here this evening, but he has sent his best wishes to us all and indeed our prestigious speaker this evening. So, without further ado, what I'd like to do, because we're also giving honorary fellowship to Kees van der Vleuten today, and I'd like to do that before he does his speech so he can concentrate and not worry about coming up to the stage. So I will hand over briefly to the registrar to read the citation for Kees.
Thanks, Derek, and welcome, everyone. I guess I should just start by saying that Honorary Fellowship is really one of the highest awards bestowed by the Academy of Medical Educators and really recognises a sustained and significant impact on medical education both across the UK and globally. It's an award importantly nominated by peers of the recipients and then discussed and ratified by the Prizes and Awards group of the Academy of Medical Educators. It's an award that the recipient has for their lifetime. We're very lucky this year, and I'm very pleased to announce that we have 5 individuals who are being awarded, and sadly one of those, Professor Ian Cameron, isn't able to be with us this evening, but he will be awarded his award at the December conference at the RCOG. We may plug that a few times this evening, so apologies in advance if I sound like a broken record. So as we've explained, we'd like to award our first of our honorary fellowships this evening before the Calman lecture, with the rest later on. So Professor Kees van der Vleuten has been at the University of Maastricht in the Netherlands since 1982. In 1996, he was appointed Professor of Education and Chair of the Department of Educational Development and Research in the Faculty of Health, Medicine and Life Sciences, a post he held until 2014. Since 2005, he's been the Scientific Director of the School of Health Professions Education. This graduate school offers Master's and PhD degrees in health sciences education to a wide variety of international students. He mentors many researchers in medical education and has supervised more than 70 doctoral graduate students. His primary expertise lies in evaluation and assessment, and he's published widely in this domain and holds numerous academic awards, including several career awards. In 2005, he received the John P. Hubbard Award for significant contribution to research and development of assessment of medical competence from the National Board of Medical Examiners in the United States. And in 2010, he received a Dutch Royal Decoration for the societal impact of his work. And in 2012, the Karolinska Prize for Research in Medical Education. He serves frequently as a consultant internationally and holds honorary academic appointments at universities across the world, including in Australia and in South Africa. And it therefore gives me great pleasure to welcome and present the honorary fellowship to Professor Kees van der Vleuten, who I think is a very worthy recipient.
Please. Yep. Okay. One switch. Second switch. And I should be audible. And you're nodding. So I am. Well, thank you very much. It's a great honor to be invited to give the Calman lecture. I thank the Academy for this opportunity. I'm going to frame this nicely for my office, and will be a proud about this for the rest of my life. And I'm really very grateful. I thank the Academy, I thank the University of Exeter, I thank Adrian Freeman in particular, who's done a great job in organising this conference. But I'm here to talk about assessment. Quite, daunting that you all took the bus to come and listen to me. That's imposing, makes me humble, a bit scared, but let's see. The theme of the conference is crossing boundaries, and I've been reflecting on that and thinking which kind of boundaries did we cross in assessment in education. And I think I found a few which I will share with you. So the overview of my talk is that I will look at some of the boundaries, a couple of boundaries that we crossed, and I've listed to 3. And then I can't help it, but I have to talk about programmatic assessment as well, to then finish up with a couple of conclusions. I think the first boundary that I'd like to discuss with you is the move of thinking from individual assessment methods to programs of assessment. And for those of you who may have followed my publications, I published a paper in 1996 in which I distinguished a number of quality characteristics for assessment methods. And I actually realized that you can't have everything. You can't have perfect reliability. You don't have infinite resources. So you're bound to come to a compromise. And I put these quality characteristics in a formula that the utility of any form of assessment will depend on the multiplication of these different quality characteristics, weighted by the weight you wish to give it, given a certain situation, given a certain context. In a particular setting, like for example, in a very high-stakes certification setting, you will not easily compromise on reliability, right? But in an in-training setting, you might wish to make your compromise differently. So basically, and this formula has gone viral, really. And actually, I discovered it was on a pen of the Royal College in Canada. But the implication is that you can't have it all, and you have to make mindful compromises. And assessment really, therefore, to me, is an optimization problem. And how to optimize what and when has been a lifetime puzzle for me. It's easy to demonstrate that individual assessment methods can't have it all. If we look at reliability studies, which is in this slide, here reliability coefficients are expressed as a function of testing time for different testing methods. Most of them might be clear to you. P&P is the patient management problem, which is a clinical reasoning exercise.
and expressed as a function of testing time so that we may compare across different test formats. Now what you see is pretty bad news, because any individual assessment, one quickly needs 3, 4, 5 hours of assessment testing time before you can conclude to a reliable outcome. Yet in other words, most of our assessments in actual practice are not very reliable. Yet in other words, one single measure is no measure. And it's more smart to combine information. Bad news. I can't help it. What's behind it is that any sort of performance is contextually bound. So you need a lot of contexts in order to come up with an outcome which is no longer dependent on the contexts in the assessment. Or yet in other words, 2 different contexts, whether that be items, whether that be stations or orals, disagree a lot on the competency of an individual. That's what's behind it. So from a purely psychometric reliability perspective, bad news. Maybe also bad news from a validity perspective. I mean, we all know this pyramid, and we have been climbing it in the past 30, 40 years. And with every new development, we were excited in terms of now we may have developed the gold standard, and it never was. Although sometimes we still think we have gold standards. For example, I think in the UK, OSCEs are sort of the holy grail, often. But I'm not sure they are. To me, they're just one instrument on this particular pyramid, and one piece of information, and may not always be the best information. Also from a learning perspective, we heard you saying that assessment drives the learning, but a lot of that driving is negative. It's not so optimal. I see learners hunting grades. I see a great culture. I see a lot of reductionism. I see little information in the system. What we typically do is we have a course, and an end-of-course assessment. We often hide the questions from the students, and then we give them a grade. Well, that's a very poor form of information. And if they pass, they move on. They're sort of immune for life. And if they fail, they have to repeat the test. We don't look at what the problem is. We simply say repeat the test. Repeat the test. If they pass, they're immune for life. Move on to the next course. And if they fail, we take another blind decision, repeat the course. And this, I think is a very reductionist approach to assessment. I see little meaningful information in the system. I see a lot of tick box exercises. I see that a lot around OSCEs. I see a lot of trivial behavior by the learners. And I see very few longitudinal developmental elements in assessment. So also from a learning perspective, we may do a lot better than we currently do. This is probably our dominant model of assessment. With thanks to Carlos for the slide. But this is it. Students working for the test, then forgetting it. Are you familiar with the forget curves in psychology? If you learn something by heart for the occasion, it's gone, 50% is gone in a week or 2 weeks' time. Right, so to me, the optimization program can be solved if you think of the program as a whole and not as an individual assessment instrument. You'll never achieve an optimal situation for any individual assessment. You can only do that when you look at everything together from a more holistic perspective. And that, to me, is the basis for programmatic assessment, on which I will talk later on. But in there, we optimize the individual assessment for learning, for giving feedback, for giving proper feedback, for giving meaningful feedback to the learner, to which the learner may engage. And then once we've done that, and once we've done a lot of that information, we can use that information for decision making, but not before that. Right, so that to me is the first sort of crossing a border. Let's move to the next one. Measuring the unmeasurable. And I think what we do a lot in assessment is to assess what we may well assess, what is relatively easy to assess. And we tend to assess these skills and not other skills. Well, if we look around and what's happening in the world, this is what's happening. We're developing these frameworks of outcomes in which we have had a lot of stakeholder input to develop these outcomes. These have not been developed overnight. And this is done in various parts of the world, and there are many more than these three. And what strikes to me is that they're very similar, particularly if you start looking underneath. And that's interesting because apparently there's consensus of what society wants our doctors to be able to do. The second thing that I find really striking is that they move beyond the knowledge domain, beyond the technical expertise. Most of these skills are very complex skills. Most of these skills can only be observed through behavior. That's a daunting task. Very difficult to assess these kind of skills in standardized tests. To some extent it may be possible, but it will be limited, very, very limited. So what actually needs to happen, we need to invest these skills, also because they're very important in the labour market. If things go wrong in actual practice, these kind of skills are involved. Done a study, hospital complaints, Maastricht, 80% of all the complaints were related to communication. Studies around showing that problems in actual practice could already be identified in school. Studies showing how well you do in the labour market is also defined by these kind of skills. So they're pretty important. Nowadays we naturally have the interestable professional activities. So we also have the tasks in there, but still we have to rely on observation. We have to reverse, basically, Miller's pyramid. If we wish to assess these kind of complex skills, we need this top of the pyramid. We need to observe, and we need to make a professional judgment about an individual. No escape. Isn't that very subjective? Well, let me give you two answers to that. The first answer is a psychometric answer. We have developed an electronic portfolio, and that's being used many places within the country and outside the country. So we're sitting on a huge database. And if we do the number crunching, then we find this. On a mini-CX, a clinical observation. If we have 8 of these observations, we get a pretty robust picture. That's pretty feasible. Same is true for assessing technical skills. Same is true for multi-source feedback. So actually, not too bad, really. If we combine information from the incidents, for example, if we combine information from mini-CEXs with multi-source feedback, the samples even become smaller. You need fewer samples within a method if you combine the information. So that's not bad news at all. And if we go back to the slide I just showed, you can't say in this slide that the more objective tests do better than the more subjective assessments. You know, we've actually been bashing on methods like the oral exam or the long case, and we started to objectify clinical examinations, OSCE. OSCE sought to improve by objectification and by structuring. But it was not in the objectification nor in the structuring, we know many years later, but in the sampling. And if we apply the sampling to old-fashioned methods, we find pretty good results, even better than the OSCE. Or in actual practice, mini-CEX, video assessment, incognito standardized patients, pretty feasible samples. Right. Also, now switch to an educational answer. This was a psychometric answer, but now an educational answer. How do you learn a complex skill? And I turn to a dissertation that was defended last year. One of our PhD students, Valerie, she did a phenomenal study. What she did, she studied how communication was learned in family practice and in surgery. Now, in family practice, they pay a lot of attention to communication skills. They typically record videos on which learners get feedback from peers, from supervisors. In family practice, they also have a lot of good role models. In surgery, they hardly pay any attention to communication. This is unique to the Netherlands, of course. And actually, the residents say, we would like to learn communication badly, but don't involve our supervisors because they can't do it. Quite interesting. What then happens in family practice is that you see a developmental model of how people learn such a complex skill, which starts with a set of more or less technical skills, how to structure, how to do open-ended questions, and technical skills. As a result of confrontation and feedback, you start to realize you have to change. And if the climate is safe, and if you have the cognitive and emotional space, you may then try out new behaviors. What then happens if you tried out those behaviors, these kind of behaviors will internalize, will become part of your repertoire. And if they are internalized and part of your repertoire, they become clinically, flexibly usable. So then you adopt certain communication strategies deliberately because you wish to achieve a certain goal with this particular patient. Very interesting. If this shows how a complex skill is learned, it needs to be done in the full authentic context. You need to have proper feedback there. You need to have role models. You need to have relationships. These are all very important to learn such a complex skill. And if this is exemplary for all the other complex skills, then this shows a clear pathway of how we should develop skills. The residents in family practice say, we can do your OSCE, fine, and we'll do it. But it has no relationship with what we're learning in clinical practice. Right, so this is the 5-phase model that she developed out of that. So from technical skills to skilled communication. From communication skills to skilled communication. Very, very interesting. So to me, Another PhD student that we had, he said it's quite clear we have to normalize a feedback culture in medicine. And Chris Watling actually studied how the feedback culture in medicine and compared it with sports and music. And it's quite clear that in medicine, there's hardly any feedback culture compared to the other areas. So we need to normalize our feedback culture, and we need to promote trusting relationships. We wish to develop self-directed learning, lifelong learning. That requires a lot of directing and a lot of help and a lot of support. Right, so to me, this is another kind of a breakthrough. By using professional judgment, feedback, and relationships, we may start to developmentally assess complex skills that healthcare badly needs. I think that's another characteristic of these outcome frameworks. This is really what healthcare needs, and I think Eric will talk about that tomorrow as well. So we may promote healthcare if we do it properly. The final one, embracing the subjective. And I start again with a dissertation which has just been defended by Shipra Ginsburg from Toronto, and her defense was with us. Shipra did phenomenal studies. She looked at in-training evaluation reports in Canada, which are being done every couple of months over the residents' performance. And it has a quantitative component and a qualitative component. She demonstrated that the sort of signal, the measurement information was about 5-6 times larger for qualitative information than for quantitative information. And she was able to demonstrate that learners, despite the fact that the narrative information was polished, was friendly, hedging, she called that, learners were quite able to read between the lines and to understand what they were doing. And actually it points me to the fact that words have a lot more meaning if we talk about very complex skills. And if we wish to assess very complex skills, scores have less meaning. And words do. So narrative information is pretty important. Tomorrow, Marjan Horvath will talk about the use of narratives, and she's in the room. And she published a nice paper where she actually said, assessors making a professional judgment are living things, are living people. And we can never standardize it or completely calibrate it. That's simply impossible. And perhaps that's also not even needed. Because from a learning perspective, having different perspectives from assessors might be beneficial to your learning. That you, Andre, have a different perspective on my learner than you have, Renee, might be very beneficial to my learning. It's noise in the psychometric sense, but it's information for me as a learner. And then she's continued to say that we need, if we move from scores to words, we need a different validation framework. We need to think differently on how we use narrative information and how we build the validity argument for that. Well, she was served immediately because a very nice paper from David Cook and Shipra Ginsburg again, where they pleaded for a validation framework using Keynes framework and putting it into relevant for narrative purposes. Very interesting paper. Goes too far to talk about, but I wish to show you this. I think that if we move from scores to words, we need also to use the methodologies and the insights from qualitative research. And I think that each have their own perspective on things. And it goes back to the discussion we had this morning. It's a false dichotomy. It's not either or, it is and. And if we talk about scores, and if we wish to develop a calibrated, high-quality multiple choice for the GMC, we use top psychometrics. But if we wish to know how a learner develops on his professionalism, we need a lot of words, narratives. And need to judge that, and we need to triangulate that, and we need to make that information robust. And it's possible. And I'll show you an example later on of how we bring some robustness into more qualitative judgments. So to me, this is another sort of breakthrough. We need to embrace the subjective. We need to embrace the professional judgment. But we naturally need to make things robust. I mean, essentially, I actually think that clinicians use the qualitative paradigm very strongly. I think they use quantitative information and qualitative information all the time to arrive at a professional judgment. Is that professional judgment biased? Yes, it is. That's why we have guidelines, maybe even decision support systems, second opinions, right? But we don't take away that judgment from that individual. And the robots, maybe they're coming, but it will take quite some while before they're able to particularly look at the humanistic elements of the assessment. So I think this is another breakthrough, and I think that by embracing the subjective and by adopting qualitative research strategies, a surprisingly new dimension is added to the field of assessment. Right. So to me, these are clear boundaries that we have crossed. Now, let's talk about programmatic assessment, because programmatic assessment, to me, unites all those different views. They fit together. And in order to let you know what programmatic assessment is, I'll show you this video.
In daily life, people are often assessed. At school, for example, when given grades for tests, or at work to decide if there is a reason for promotion. The toolbox to assess any part of competence is well filled. Methods are readily available. Yet each individual method of assessment has severe limitations, both statistically and educationally. Not a single method can do it all, but together they can. Therefore, we should stop optimizing single assessment methods and rather optimize the program of assessment as a whole. This can be done by programmatic assessment. In programmatic assessment, each individual moment of assessment is considered to be a single data point, never leading to a decision to pass or fail. Any single assessment should provide rich information that is meaningful as feedback to the learner. Decision-making over a learner's progression is taken based on multiple data points. The number of data points depends on the importance of the decision. Very high-stakes decisions, such as a promotion or a certification, need to be based on many data points. Any method of assessment can be used in a particular data point. The choice of method depends on the educational justification for using it at that moment in time and its fit to the rest of the assessment program. Feedback on the assessment is used to guide learning. This is strongly promoted when a dialogue on all feedback and other learning information is created. Coaches help to guide learners in the use of feedback in their personal development. Programmatic assessment gathers ongoing rich assessment information on a learner until sufficient information is available to make a robust overall decision. It can be applied to learning in schools and in workplace learning. It is an answer to making assessment more meaningful for learning, while at the same time having solid evidence to make robust decisions about learners. Are you interested? Look on Google Scholar for some interesting papers on programmatic assessment.
Well, a number of these papers you may find on my homepage. and freely available. But basically what we do is treating individual data points as pixels in a picture. So if you have one pixel, if you have one data point, you can't see a lot. You don't see the image. So it's dangerous to take decisions there. You don't have the image. You're looking through a keyhole at a person. If you then gather more data points, the picture will emerge and it will be clear. And if you have sufficient clarity, then you can take high-stake decisions. So what we do is we make a distinction between low-stake and high-stake decisions, and they're related to the data points. So a low-stake decision is very feedback-oriented. Also probably has a lot of different methods of assessment. You can use any sort of assessment, all depending what you wish to promote with that assessment for that learner at that moment in time. And to me, the choice of a method, it depends on the educational justification of that method in that moment in time. And there's probably a lot of variability because you want your learners to write here, to synthesize there, to verbally express themselves there, and so on and so forth. And then if you have more data points, you can actually look at where that learner is going. And you can diagnose and say, hey, there are certain areas that need further development, and you need to remediate. Remediation is quite different from read-sit exams. Remediation is personalized. Remediation is developmental. And then finally, if you have a high-stake decision to be taken, then you need a lot of these data points. The picture needs to be clear. But then you can do that, not before that. Now, still abstract, I'm going to show you one example of programmatic assessment. It becomes quite popular in different settings, undergraduate and postgraduate. But I'm going to stick to my own local context. And we have a graduate entry program in medicine where we have implemented programmatic assessment. We actually have a 6-year undergraduate program and a 4-year graduate entry program where learners come in with a relevant bachelor degree. On top of that, they get a Master of Science in Clinical Research. So they do a lot of research activities as well. Basically, we train in 3 years to become a medical doctor and 1 year to become a scientist. And we have high expectations of them. We have a problem-based curriculum. We have a very interesting 2nd-year patient-based problem-based learning, which is quite interesting, but I'm not going into that. Clerkship rotations, participation of half a year in a research project, half a year in a clinical rotation of their liking, and the research and the rotation may be connected to each other. The assessment program is modular, like any assessment program. We use a lot of mini-tests, short tests, and get feedback on that. We also have a lot of longitudinal assessment. There's an ongoing peer assessment, multi-source feedback, all the time, where learners are being evaluated in relation to the candidates' competencies as we have adopted them in the Netherlands. We also have cognitive testing. You've heard of progress testing today. Chris talked about it this morning. These are tests that assess the end objectives of the curriculum, which we periodically administer to all the students in the curriculum, and we monitor their progress until final graduation. All assessment is informative. There needs to be feedback, and is formative. Is low stakes. It might not be completely formative, but it's low stakes. The portfolio is a central instrument. They gather the information in the portfolio, and the portfolio is being used to judge at the end of the year. At the end of the year, we'll judge the portfolio here. Naturally, halfway through the year, we will give them feedback. The portfolio will be evaluated as well. But we don't, let's say, you get your ECTS credits, not with individual assessments, but over the year as a whole. We pay a lot of attention to feedback, and this has come up a couple of times now today. So a learner may look at their progress test results longitudinally, looking at their total scores, looking at their discipline scores, certain topics, the aggregate of all basic sciences, the aggregate of all clinical sciences, and they may analyze how they develop in time and take actions if that's needed. We have this electronic portfolio that generates feedback reports. These are quantitative feedback reports in which the spikes are the different competencies, and the number behind the individual competencies are the number of data points that we have for it. The computer may also show you your EPA development, your trustable professional activities, and how far you are and which level you are. We may also look at your performance in time, and we may click on any of these dots and then find the quantitative and qualitative information behind it. Probably the most important button in the portfolio is the button to generate all the narrative feedback. And you get the story over an individual learner. And the story is really powerful. You may filter it for certain competencies if you wish, but this is really powerful. Then all learners are guided by mentors. We call them counselors. I hate that term, but they're guided by mentors. And mentoring is a pretty powerful method to support students. Very powerful. The research is quite positive about it. Very powerful way of helping students to self-direct. Simply providing feedback to learners won't work. Chris, you did a study, and I think you talked about this morning, that learners do not engage with feedback if you don't scaffold it in some way. And I think the scaffolding needs to be some form of interaction. And if you then build trusting relationships between mentors and learners, these mentors follow these students 4 years long through the curriculum. Again, self-directed learning requires a lot of directing. And then the decision-making is done by a committee. So the committee decides, looks at all the information, and judges. They make another professional judgment. Isn't that a lot of work? No, it isn't. Because for 95% of the students, this is a crystal clear decision which doesn't require any effort. So we don't invest any effort in those. But we deliberate about the very few that need deliberation. So we put in a lot of expertise, assessor expertise, in a few learners where the judgment is really critical. The committee may justify their decisions. They may motivate their decisions. Naturally, the outcome of the decision can hardly be a surprise to the learner. If that were the case, then something would have gone wrong previously. The committee is prepared well. The mentor may not have a decision in the committee itself to protect the mentor's position in relation to the student. The number of people in the committee will determine how trustworthy the decision will be. You can think of all kinds of measures to build trustworthiness to that decision. And you can derive them from qualitative research methodology, and then take those measures in actual practice to build trust to the decision. And they also have their quantitative counterpart. But you don't replace it with an actuarial decision. It's a professional judgment now from a group of assessors who make up their mind. By the way, we've been doing that now for many years. The decision-making part of it is not really a big issue. Never had a lot of appeals. It really is smoothly running. Right, just to brag a little bit, just published this paper where we analyzed the knowledge scores on the progress test between the graduate entry programs and the undergraduate students. And we found one effect size of a difference, that the graduate entry students outperformed the undergraduate students. They start lower in their first year as compared to the undergraduate students, but then they catch up very, very quickly. And if you look at their basic sciences, it's even more than one effect size. And if you look at their scores on research, it's even more. I've never seen that in my life. We also showed that they use all the feedback a lot more than the undergraduate students, simply because we require them to do so. Right. So let's come to a conclusion. A couple of conclusions. I think that this program view on assessment resolves this optimization problem that I have been puzzling about all my professional life. We know where to optimize what now. And I think that assessment starts to assess the unmeasurable, and we should, and we must. And if we don't do that, modern education programs will fail. Because assessment drives learning, and is more powerful than the curriculum. And I think that professional judgment does not deserve its bad reputation at all, and that we need to use it. And use it in such a way that's defensible. And I think we should actually embrace and deal with this objective. It's a wonderful new arena. And to me, assessment is basically a mixed method study on an individual. A quantitative and a qualitative inquiry to make sense about the development of an individual. And then programmatic assessment, I think, has an answer to a modern constructivist view on learning, promoting skills that may improve healthcare. And then we'll finish up again with one of our PhD students, Chris Harrison, who just completed the study where he looked at assessment cultures in different schools. One school had a classic, more summative orientation to assessment, and others had programmatic assessment systems and cultures. And he came to the conclusion that this study really demonstrates that if you move away from this behavioristic view on assessment, you reveal the potential benefits of authenticity, empowering students with a more active role, engaging them, and gradual de-scaffolding to enable transformation towards a learning orientation, a real learning orientation. And I can't agree more. And with that, I rest my case.
So we do have time for questions. Yes.
Just ask what the disciplines of the counsellors were, who were the people that acted.
Who are the counsellors is the question. Regular faculty members. So, ordinary teachers. They have clinicians, basic scientists, whatever that we have in school. Yeah. They must have a little bit of a view on the curriculum, and they must have some skills. We train them. And actually, what we find is that it's a very gratifying role. Because you get, in personal contact with learners. Problem is actually much more that they get too involved with the students. And often cross boundaries there in terms of what is your role exactly, and I'm not your healthcare provider. But it's a strong element of the system. Anyone else? Debbie. And the far back, but Debbie first.
I'll shout before I get thanks so much, Case, and I've been following your work, and we've collaborated lots of times. And it comes to me that, when we're looking into this complexity, actually, assessment programs asks a lot from our supervisors to do well. Do you see the analogy with what Valerie's work is that sort of communication is a very complex skill? Is it not that the development, helping the development of our students is a very complex skill for our supervisors?
Definitely.
And that we need to train them way more than we're doing now?
Definitely. To me, educational change is much more a question of change management than of educational technology. And, if you approach this too summatively, like what happened in the UK, and if it becomes ticking boxes, tick, 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 we've done that, it won't work. And it won't work if the stakeholders don't understand what they're doing. I always take the analogy also with problem-based learning. That also is a complete cultural shift for teachers. I've seen many implementations fail, or hybrids or whatever, but I also see them fail. And it always is related to the buy-in from the staff. And if you do PBL, you'll find that the tutor role is the most difficult role, and there's a lot of variability. So if you change towards the system, you need to have this cultural change as well. And people have to realize why they're doing what they're doing. By the way, it's also not rocket science, because I do a lot of feedback trainings. And I always take the analogy with how you deal with your patients and how you deal with your learners. That has a lot of similarities. And then I often say, you're not judging someone whether that's going to be a good doctor. It's the here and the now. Use your clinical capacity, expertise, to make a focused evaluation of what has happened here. That's not rocket science.
We'll talk about it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your answer.
In the back, two people in the back.
Yep.
Yep.
Thanks, Casey. I'm a big fan of the idea of pragmatic assessment. It's nice to see you talking about it here. The one thing that I think I still struggle with, and it is in a couple of your papers.
I'm glad it's only one thing.
The thing I've often found difficult is this notion of mastery tasks, especially for the process of certification.
Yep.
So I do a lot of work with lots, especially trained colleges.
Yep.
People that in the course of their work, if they do something incorrect in this calibrator, they're not going to kill 200 people in a day.
Yep.
And I guess it's around the role and the place of that type of task.
Yeah. Well, in one of my papers, I discussed mastery tasks. Because if they're really mastery tasks, they should be treated as mastery tasks. And you certify them.
What does that mean, and what does it look like?
Well, you simply certify that particular activity. Like if you want to do resuscitation skills, you have to demonstrate at a certain point in time that you're a master of that skill. I think the trustable professional activities move towards that direction as well. we testify, we judge whether that individual may autonomously do this particular task. I'm not sure whether the simple reasoning of having judged everything as a mastery, having judged every EBA, will be the final judgment. We were doing a study where we looked at how clinicians entrust learners. And it's a much more generic thing that entrustment doesn't only happen when doing a particular clinical task. It happens when the learner asks a question at the coffee. It happens by all kinds of vicarious observations. And the entrustment is much more generic. But if it's a mastery test, if it's a mastery skill, then you have to assess it as a mastery skill. Gentleman in the back.
The microphone doesn't work.
Okay, well, I'll be loud. It's fine. Everyone hear me? Okay. What I'm wondering, I guess, I'm thinking about assessments and psychometrics from a broader view. What I mean by that is I wonder if one of our big problems is around clarity of what is psychometrics. What I mean by that, I mean, I'm kind of young, so I wasn't around with the original pioneers of psychometrics. So, for example, Thurstone in 1927. So, psychometrics was born out of the law of comparative judgment. Okay, whenever we're comparing people on a psychological construct, we're making a comparative judgment. So when you really look at the original literature, it was never meant to be objective. The idea of objectivity in psychometrics is actually quite recent. So I guess what I'm kind of saying is that society in general, and also us in medical education, are often not very aware that psychometrics is everywhere. You know, if you think about Bush versus Clinton.
Okay.
We are actually making a rank-ordered judgment in elections because we assume that these candidates have some kind of psychological trait that is stable and that we have predictive validity. We can tell if they behave this way in the debate, that they might behave like this when they get into office.
Well, thank you.
So,
oh, there's more coming.
I'm just trying to tie it back into your sort of presentation, and it's only because there seems to be a dichotomy between the psychometrics and quantitative research and qualitative. There seems to be a distinction, but I'm just trying to say that perhaps we need to rethink this distinction, because even if you rank order in a formative or summative assessment, even if you move the actual classification to the end of the degree program,
Sir,
just saying you're not getting away from psychometrics.
May I invite you to write a paper on that?
Perhaps I might.
And you can even be more elaborate there. I have been trained as a psychometrician, very much in the quantitative tradition. And later on, I've been involved in a lot of qualitative research. And it's a revelation. It's a different perspective. It adds to what I already knew. And I think that we shouldn't make this a debate again for the one against the other. Again, I think that's the false dichotomy. It's how can we benefit from both viewpoints? And I guess that's what we need to do. And we need to embrace more of the qualitative approaches if we wish to move more from scores to words. That's what I'm saying. First the lady over there, and then you, Amir, okay? Yes, well, there's no mic. You have to shout, and I'll repeat the question.
It's Lucy from Lift Up at the University of Liverpool. would you envisage a future in which medical education moved away from high-stakes end-of-year exams, including finals, to purely longitudinal assessment?
Yes. And in some instances, this already exists. I last year visited the Canadian General Practice Training, and they do a wonderful thing. They write a very short field note every day on the resident. Every day. And actually it didn't take until they made that mandatory every day. That narrative turns into, the field notes turn into a narrative after some time over the residents. The narrative is being used to guide the learning, to ultimately also take decisions over the learners. What they find, there's not a quantitative piece of information in there. What they find is that they get a really good picture of the learners, and they spot them early on if they're in difficulties. So I was quite fascinated with that. So this doesn't mean that I'm against quantitative methods of assessment. I think we'd like to take the best of two worlds. Those of you who've been to our progress testing workshop, we do a lot of cognitive testing, but we make it more meaningful to the learner. And I'm appalled by the fact that we all have these final certification examinations where we take this final decision. You're far too late with that final decision. If you want to make a decision, do it early on, and then guide the learner towards the final point.
So it all makes perfect sense, and I think we're really excited by it. But there's a lot of college regulations that really restrict us. Do you have tips? And one way would be to have the Deputy Vice-Chancellor listen to the talk. That's quite clever, Adrian. And then they said, well, this is amazing, we need to take it forward. But for those who haven't heard it, and there's years and years of regulations, how do we actually get by?
Well, the anecdote is that our first implementation of programmatic assessment failed because of the lawyers. And then I went to my rector, and I said to the rector, please fence your lawyers. We're going to do this. We're going to innovate. And he backed us up, and we did it. So we bended the rules. Yeah. I know a lot of universities have strategies about grades and all sorts of things. But yeah.
Thank you. And do you have legal challenges for your decisions, which I appreciate that things like OSCEs are also based on subjective decisions, but at least you end up with a quantified mark that people can say it's 49 and not 50. But I wonder whether your group of people looking at the 5%, whether they end up with lawyers' letters.
If they truly would know what the 49 and the 50 means, you would be sued in court immediately, and you would lose. If you really would mean what that means, 49 or 50. But actually, we haven't been sued at all. And may I refer to the work of Leslie Southgate, who was working with underperforming doctors. And Pauline McAvoy has worked a long time looking at underperforming doctors, implementing evaluation strategies which were highly contextual, highly based on expert judgment, highly based on narrative information, reports were being made, and the ultimate consequence could be, it was all there for remediation, but NCAS could actually take away your license. And I think the UK is a role model for that, for other countries. You have been sued many, many times. Have you lost the case? No. Never? So. In case we...
Here in the UK, we encourage all of our clinicians to engage in medical education and to carry out multiple assessments, particularly in specialty training. And most of our medical schools use clinicians to carry out these assessments on students. Do you get any experience of fatigue amongst the clinicians? You know, another multi-source feedback form we look at in here.
No, we've done studies and how well work-based assessments were implemented in the Netherlands, and they were completely related to buy-in of the staff. And if there was buy-in, the work-based assessment was really done well. And if it's done well, it starts to fuel engagement, both from the side of the learner as from the side of the supervisor. And I think engagement is really important. Engagement is to become absorbed with a certain process. You want more of it instead of less of it. And it's that kind of engagement that we're after. I know it sounds like a utopia, but I think it is possible, and we should strive for it, and we should try it. Yeah, you have a mic? No.
It's fine, I can shout. How do you turn your really useful qualitative assessments into data for your end of year assessment?
That's done through the committee. So how do you turn all your qualitative data? Well, we have quantitative and qualitative data, and that needs to turn into a decision. And that decision is a professional judgment decision, now done by the committee. The committee has standards, so there are written standards for each of the competencies, sort of like the milestones as they are developed in the US. So we have the committee has some support in doing that, but ultimately it is a professional judgment decision, nothing else. Debbie.
I'm sorry, but I'm picking up from Adrian's point, and maybe in Maastricht it's really ideal, but in Groningen we have the same noises. You know, our students get fatigued by the mini CEX and all the tick box exercises, and we actually
the tick box exercises, yes.
But also the narratives. I'll show you tomorrow some papers that we looked at the curriculum in action, and it's not at all related to what we meant. And our supervisors don't use it the way it was meant. And you know, there are many explanations for this, and it will go into too much detail. But you know, I think it's actually an important thing we should take into account. Because if we do get fatigue, both with our learners or our assessors, we're doing something wrong. And we need to address it really well, I think. Thanks.
Yeah, Maastricht is not ideal, and I can critique the system easily also from within. I always take the analogy with problem-based learning. You know, it's very difficult to get your actors to do the thing that they need to do, and that's also very difficult. And then I think that maybe we do too much, and I actually think that the principle of less is more is applicable, and I think that we should do less really well than do a lot shallowly. Yeah. Right, I think they want drinks.
Once again, thank you very much. We will now carry on with the remainder of the awards ceremony for the Academy of Medical Educators. I do hope many of you will agree to remain to honour those people who've made such a lasting contribution both to our organisation and indeed to medical education across the UK. And I will now hand over to the Registrar.
Thank you very much indeed. Before we award the rest of the honorary fellowships, I'm pleased to announce that since November 2015 we've had over 120 applicants who've been successful in receiving the awards of either membership or fellowship of the Academy, which is against our professional standards and really represents a great development in the numbers that we have coming through the process. A number of those, in fact 119 of them, are not able to be here this evening, but we do have one representative who will be picking up their award of membership. I think it's particularly pleasing to us that that member is a junior doctor who works down in Plymouth, and it does represent the fact that we are increasingly encouraging junior medical educators to become involved in the Academy. So I hope you can join me in welcoming and congratulating Michael Kocher for membership of the Academy of Medical Educators. Brilliant. Well, that brings us on to the remainder of the Honorary Fellowship Awards for the rest of this evening. Our next Honorary Fellow, who we're very pleased to welcome and award Honorary Fellowship to, is Professor Eric Dreesen. Professor Dreesen is a highly qualified medical educator and holds both a master's degree in educational science and a PhD in medical education. He is Professor in Medical Education and Chair of the world-renowned Department of Educational Development and Research at the Faculty of Health, Medicine and Life Sciences at Maastricht University. He's also Editor-in-Chief of the respected journal Perspectives on Medical Education. Professor Dreesen is interested in evaluation and assessment, and more specifically topics such as learning and assessment in the workplace, mentoring, and the use of portfolios for learning and assessment. He's also interested in education across different cultures and publishes widely on all these topics in many different journals, as well as some very well-read books. As part of Professor Dreesen's work, he does a number of international things, including mentoring PhD students from a number of different countries, and participates in a number of international projects, such as consultancies and research projects in and outside of Europe. And for example, in 2008, he was a visiting medical school professor in Japan. Obviously, Professor Dreesen is another very worthy recipient of Honorary Fellowship, and it gives me great pleasure to present him for the award this evening.
Thank you.
Our next recipient is another Eric. I promised there wasn't a kind of a conspiracy to award only Erics, but 40% of our honorary fellows are named Eric this evening. Dr. Eric Holmboe is a board-certified internal medicine specialist and is Senior Vice President for Milestones Development and Evaluation at the Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education in the United States. Prior to joining the ACGME in January 2014, he served as the Chief Medical Officer and Senior Vice President of the American Board of Internal Medicine and the ABIM Foundation. He's also Professor Adjunct of Medicine at Yale University and Adjunct Professor at the Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences. Prior to joining the ABIM in 2004, he was the Associate Programme Director at Yale Primary Care Internal Medicine Residency Programme and Director of Student Clinical Assessment at the Yale School of Medicine. Before joining Yale in 2000, he served as Division Chief of General Internal Medicine at the National Naval Medical Center, and he retired from the US Naval Reserves in 2005. His research interests include interventions to improve quality of care and methods in the evaluation of clinical competence, and his professional memberships include the American College of Physicians, where he's a Fellow, the Society of General Internal Medicine, and the Association of Medical Education in Europe, and he's an Honorary Fellow of the Royal College of Physicians in London. Dr. Holmboe graduated from Franklin and Marshall College and the University of Rochester School of Medicine, and he completed some of his residency at the Yale New Haven Hospital. His work has clearly been very influential and greatly advanced medical education globally, and again, another very worthy recipient.
There we go. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie.
And last, but I hasten to add, not least, and not another Eric, is Professor Valerie Wass at OBE. Professor Wass has been head of the School of Medicine at Keele University since 2009. She's published a number of highly cited papers on evaluation, QA and assessment methodology, and is chair of the RCGP International Committee. She was awarded a National Teaching Fellowship in 2008, and her research centres on cultural diversity within medical training, professionalism, and the development of healthcare education to meet the needs of globalisation. Val was awarded an OBE in the New Year's Honours List in 2015 for services to medical education. She was the first woman ever elected onto the MSc executive. She has also, over the years, led several major changes in undergraduate medical education and postgraduate education, both nationally and internationally. Last year, Professor Wass was awarded the President's International Medal by the Royal College of General Practitioners. This medal is only awarded occasionally for meritorious commitment and service to the development of the college's international programme. She's also been awarded the ASME Gold Medal in 2015 for outstanding contribution to medical education. And I'm sure you'll agree, another very deserving recipient of this important award.
Jamie has scuttled off for reasons that will become obvious. One of the real pleasures of being the President of the Academy is the presentation of the President's Medal each and every year. There aren't too many bits of one's day job that are as pleasurable as some of the activities in the Academy. My normal day job is the Postgraduate Dean for Wales, and there's only 3 reasons you actually get into my office. 1 is if you're about to be sacked, 2 if you're asking me for money, and 3 to tell me that you could do my job much, much better than I do. So that's that. And then the UK Foundation programme, of which I've had 3 crisis calls today because the computer crashed last night, and we are just about to close the application process. So tonight is a real pleasure, a real oasis. Now, the President Medal is presented to an individual who has made an exceptional and sustained contribution to medical education and who will not usually have achieved recognition previously by other medical education organisations at a national or international level. Nominations for the President Medal are considered against the criteria set out within the Academy's professional standards. In particular, the President's Medal will be awarded to individuals who demonstrate the values of medical educator and promote the aims and objectives of the Academy, have made an outstanding, sustained contribution to medical education through at least one of the following educational scholarships, teaching and supporting learners, assessment and feedback to learners, design and planning of learning activities, and/or educational management and leadership. It gives me great pleasure to award the Academy's 2017 President's Medal to Dr. Caroline Fertelman. And before she comes down to get it, I will just outline the reasons why that she has been awarded this. To say that Caroline has been busy in her career to date would be something of an understatement, and with a huge range of achievements to choose from, I'll try to give some idea why she's receiving this recognition today. Half the time is dedicated to educational activity, the remainder being clinical work. Caroline supports a whole range of individuals, from school leavers to senior colleagues, and leads a number of education-based teams locally, regionally, and nationally. In 2015, she was senior author on some 13 peer-reviewed publications in the field of medical education, and in 2016, another 9. These articles showcase over 30 doctors in training whose work she has supported from inception to final publication. Caroline's ability to motivate, engage, and work inclusively is a key component of her approach. Caroline co-led the development of a new national undergraduate paediatric curriculum launched last year. Throughout the process, she proactively engaged stakeholders, including all 32 UK medical schools, the GMC, the Med Schools Council, and the RCPCH. She ensured the inclusion of a wide range of individuals, including parents, medical students, clinical teachers, in the Delphi process underpinning the curriculum development. Several medical schools are already using this open source material to replace existing curricula, demonstrating successful promotion and dissemination of best practice. Caroline has led on the development of the UK's first and only IBSc programme in paediatrics and child health. She has led now the most popular IBSc at UCL for 7 years. Through her leadership, the teaching fellows have undertaken individual projects, resulting in international presentations and contributing towards textbooks, and students too have had a huge number of peer-reviewed publications for their projects. In recognition of her significant contribution to teaching, Caroline has been invited to lecture and teach regularly, locally, regionally, nationally, and internationally. She engages in teaching and leadership and management skills by supporting programs for paediatricians undergoing transition. She supports dedicated and enthusiastic colleagues who are applying for education and clinical awards. In 2012, she secured a grant to facilitate teaching skills in an integrated health project in rural Bangladesh and continues to support a tranche of trainees who continue to deliver this program. Caroline is an examiner for all the clinical years for UCL Medical School. Since 2013, she's been an external examiner for Nottingham University and King's College London. Since 2014, she's been an active member of the Medical Schools Council. Caroline is an MRC-PCH clinical examiner and has developed useful and popular open source teaching materials for UCMLS and training resource for postgraduates with patients who came to be examined. She's a senior assessor and question writer for the pediatric exit assessment. In 2015, Caroline became a senior fellow for the Higher Education Academy and a UCL assessor for applications for promotion to associate fellow and senior fellow. She is a fellow of the Academy of Medical Educators and was elected to council in 2014. Caroline has supported 10 teaching fellows and their academic supervisor in the last 5 years, and hundreds of trainees in her role as teaching program director. She works tirelessly and with great enthusiasm to support the professional development of trainees. Caroline participates in regional recruitment and chairs ARCP panels. Additionally, she attends quality visits to Trust and is well known for her support for doctors in difficulty. One final quote for you. One recently wrote, "I am still a paediatric trainee due to your support and guidance over the years. I would have left if not for your support. I'm really grateful and will hopefully be a consultant like you who supports her trainees academically and emotionally." Caroline, please come down.
Thank you very much.
So the final bit of the presentation this evening, you'll be pleased to hear from me, is the Leslie Southgate Travelling Fellowship in Assessment. Dame Leslie Southgate is here with us this evening. Since being a signatory to the Academy of Medical Educators' inaugural charter in October 2006, Professor Dame Leslie Southgate has been one of the driving forces behind its development. As part of our 10th anniversary celebration, we've introduced the Dame Leslie Southgate Travelling Fellowship in Assessment to offer medical educators a unique opportunity to visit an overseas centre of excellence to gain knowledge, experience, and a different perspective on medical education assessment. It's my pleasure to announce the 2 winners of this year's fellowship. The fellowship fund of $4,500 will be split equally between Dr. Neil Sharma, who unfortunately can't be here this evening, and somebody called Dr. Jamie Reed, who actually is here this evening. Neil's project is entitled Entrustable Professional Activities as an Assessment in Simulation, and he will be visiting the New York Sim in New York, where EPAs are basically rooted. That's his project, so he will be going to do that. I'll just tell you a bit more about Jamie since he is here. Jamie's project, Making the Most of Failed Assessments, comparing our international approaches to the design and implementation of remediation, interventions for struggling learners, ensure appropriate professional identity construction. We'll also see him travelling to the States, where he'll be hosted by the University of Michigan. There are no free lunches if you get 4,500. We absolutely totally expect that they will be on this platform when they come back, and they will be presenting, and they will be the first people on the team sheet for the next conference after they've done that. I would like just for Jamie to come up, because it is photo opportunity time, although I have not got a cheque to give you today. Handshake worth more than £4,000.
Reading your present. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Thank you.
So that does leave us just slightly ahead of time, and it's always nice when the timetable says closing remarks 19:30, and then at the same time the evening drinks reception miraculously starts, so I don't know how that actually works. Thank you all for coming this evening. Thank you for staying. Please consider, if you're not, becoming a member or a fellow of the Academy of Medical Educators. We have worked quite tirelessly for several years now to get medical education recognised as an important facet of the day job, including protected teaching time. But that does mean you have a responsibility to learn how to do it properly and well. And our professional standards are a very good way of looking at that going forward. The other announcement, just to say, that we are looking at is the Academy is trying to put forward, or is working on a credential in medical education, which we hope that the GMC will take into pilot form in the new year. So this will be, you'll be able to sign off on the General Medical Register as having a credential in medical education. Other credentials will be available, but ours is that one, and that will be a portfolio-based experience. So that's part of an initiative that we are looking forward to do in the coming months, and we are some way down the line, but we do need people to come into the pilot form and help us to polish it off. So there we are. Good. Enough of me. Please do join us for drinks. I believe that they are on the balcony or at the back. And thank you. Two final things. Thank you again to Cass for the inspiring talk today, and it would be remiss of me not to thank Tony and Julie for the organisation involved in what the Academy does. So thank you to them. Thanks.